Happy video day, guys. Today we're going to be doing a Make Up Your Mind. I have been working on this since the moment that I heard that this palette was releasing. I got very intrigued by it. I was like, oh my goodness, I really want this. We need to do a Make Up Your Mind. And as I was doing this, I uncovered some very interesting facts about this new palette. What am I talking about? It's the new Pat McGrath Celestial Divinity palette. So if you guys have not seen the release photos of it, this is what it's gonna look like. This is the most shades that Pat McGrath has ever given us in a palette. That being said, I believe that this is going to be pretty tiny of a palette, but it is going to have 18 shades from Pat McGrath. So I think that's pretty phenomenal. That's a lot of shades from Pat McGrath and a great way to try her collection, right? Now, this palette is also going to be retailing you $78 US. So some people may say, what? That's so much? But people who know Pat McGrath are probably going, oh my goodness, that's so affordable. I understand both sides of this. I saw the release photos of the palette, and the palette, honestly guys, is really, really pretty. It really caught my attention. The color story is something quite unique. We're going to talk a lot about that. And there's interesting factors in this palette. So right when I saw it, I said, time to make up my mind. Let's go through my collection. Let me mimic this palette the best that I can to kind of get an idea of the color story. I can go over with you guys the thoughts that I'm having behind this palette, how I think these colors are going to work together. Also, if it's a color story that I really enjoy, and then at the end of the video I decide whether I personally think that this is worth picking up or not. But I will tell you, a lot of people are probably super excited with this brand new release. There is some more items in this collection. She's releasing some lipsticks, and she's also releasing some quads. Those quads look quite interesting. If you guys want me to do a Make Up Your Mind on the quads, let me know. September 25th is the palette. So that's the one we're focusing on today. And like always, I did do a Insta-Challenge for you guys, and I posted this image up on Instagram, and I asked you guys, what palette do you think I'm gonna mimic this week? And I figured a lot of you guys were gonna get this one right. I've been putting it up on my Insta stories like back to back to back to back. So yeah, I figured you guys would get this one. So if you guys wanna be featured in my Make Up Your Mind, all you have to do is follow me over on Instagram at Christina Brooke Beauty. Wait for me to post an image that looks like this one, and then just comment what palette you think I'm mimicking. You can show up in my next Make Up Your Mind. So before I show you guys my results all swatched on my arm and everything that I figured out, don't forget to hit that big subscribe button so you guys can see more of these videos. I post one every single week, and like I've been telling you guys, as the holidays roll around, you might be seeing even more, because like I thought, there's like 5 million palettes releasing. Like I think I have already 4 on my list. All right, so let's get into it right now. So I always start off this video by showing you guys my results. These are the results, okay? So I will tell you guys, some of these I feel like they're pretty spot on. Some of them are a little off, and I know that it has to do more with the fact that she has these dual chrome shades, and it just depends on how it's angled, what color you're going to see. And there's a reason that I know that some of these are not going to look exact to what you're seeing in the photograph, and that's because there's some interesting parts to this palette. For collectors, this may be like a total turnoff, and you guys right now are gonna go, what? And for people who are new to the brand, you're gonna be cheering and being like, yay, because this is a kind of like a Frankenstein palette, to be honest. I think a lot of you guys that follow Pat McGrath knows that Pat McGrath tends to repeat shades. Like, she repeats shades. However, I don't think there's ever been a palette that I have seen that has repeated so many shades. This palette is a combination of, if you guys remember the Star Wars collection that came out, I believe it was last holiday, she released 2 6-pan palettes. So one was called Dark Galaxy, and I believe the other one was Galactic Gold. So these were 2 collaborations with Star Wars, and they released around the holiday time. I believe they were like $65 each, and they were very pretty. I remember doing a Make Up Your Mind on them last year when they released, and thinking that especially Dark Galaxy was right up my alley. But let me show you guys on the screen right now. This new Celestial Divinity palette is Dark Galaxy and Galactic Gold. Instead of the red markings that you guys see on the screen, this actually has those exact shades in the palette. So 12 shades in this palette have already been released by Pat McGrath. So If you own Dark Galaxy or Galactic Gold, you may have already at least 12 of these shades. So just keep that in mind if you're a collector or if you're somebody who already purchased those. If you have one of them, you already have 6 shades, because this is not just like slight differences. This is the exact same shades, like repeated. 12 existing shades. Really, the palette only features 6 original shades, like new to the line. Everything else is repeated. So if you are a collector, that may get you like, but if you're not a collector, that actually might be a positive thing. I can literally get both of the palettes in very small pan sizes. I'm sure that these pan sizes are like probably the size of her minis. I'm sure that these are super small. I can get both of the palettes now. I'm kind of excited about this, to be honest, guys. So now that I've kind of given you guys the details, and some of you guys might be kind of annoyed right now, some of you guys might be super excited right now, let's get into the Make Up Your Mind, and let me show you guys what I'm thinking about this color story. We've got 18 shades to find, and I found a lot of them. So for the palettes that I grabbed a lot. And I will say this color story is different. So I did jump into the Pat McGrath Mothership 5, Colored Rain, Queen of Hearts, my new Pumpkin Spice from Too Faced. I grabbed one shade from Morphe, and this is the 15N palette. From BH Cosmetics, I jumped into the It's My Ray Ray, Natasha Denona, Sunrise. We're gonna keep on going here. One shade from Natasha Denona's Metropolis. We jumped into the Lila from Natasha Denona, one shade from Marc Jacobs as a mixer, and finally the gold from Natasha Denona. Yes, I had to jump into every single one of those palettes, which I feel like 18 palettes, in order to get this palette, because this color story is just kind of, I feel like the color story is kind of just like mixed together. So there's a lot of shades in here that maybe you wouldn't probably see all combined into one palette. So let's go ahead and let's get into the first shade. So if you guys actually own the Dark Galaxy, you guys will have this exact palette swatched on your arms right now. Like I said, I skipped out of it, so I had to actually create it. So for the first color, what I ended up doing was jumping into Sunrise. I jumped into these two top colors right here. When you mix them together, you get a tone that I believe is very similar to what Pat McGrath has going on here. Now, this tone is something that I've seen, so it's not like the most unique shade, but it's a cool shade, and it's a cool shade to have in the Pat McGrath formula. So now we're gonna get into one of 3 mattes in this palette. Yes, there's only 3 matte shades in this palette. Keep that in mind. So now I jump into the Pumpkin Spice. I jumped into this color right here called Warm and Cozy. Gorgeous, really deep burgundy shade. This looks very similar to what I'm seeing coming out in this palette. I think that that shade might be pretty spot on. Love that color. It's what I put on my outer edge. If you guys don't know, the eye looks that I create during Make Up Your Mind is a look that you could probably create if you bought this palette, because I used these colors that I swatched on my arm. So if you guys are interested in seeing how I came up with this look, it'll be up on Instagram at Christina Brooke Beauty. So that color, very pretty. First 2 tones are very nice, and I remember from the Dark Galaxy, I liked the color story. So I have a feeling the first section, the first 6, is going to be something that I'm going to enjoy because I liked the Dark Galaxy. So for the next one, I jumped into the Mothership 5 from Pat McGrath, and there's 2 colors right next to each other that I think make up the next 2 colors. So gorgeous, like rosy tone right here. It's what I have all over my lid. I love this shade. It is one of the most beautiful shades in the entire universe. Now, I think that in the new palette, it's not going to be this exact formula. This is her formula that has like the glitter particles in it. I think that this one's going to be like a metallic shade in the new formula. I like this color a lot. It's a very, very pretty tone. I also think it allows you to kind of soften up looks if you're not really into like the bright, fun colors. That one's very pretty. Next shade, I actually jumped right back in here, and I jumped into this little neighboring color right here that's kind of like a deeper gold. It's kind of like a brownish gold. Very, very pretty tone. Also a gorgeous tone from Pat McGrath. Now also this one has a special formula. The one in the new palette is just going to be, I believe, just the metallic. So those 4, gorgeous shades. I like them. I think that they play nice together, and it's a really pretty combination. So the next one, I jumped into my Colored Rain Queen of Hearts, and I jumped into this color called Royal Highness. It's a really pretty, like almost like a mauve-ish gray color. This tone to me looks very similar to what I'm seeing in this palette. I think that this is going to be one of those that shifts a little bit in the light. I like this tone. I also think it's a nice tone with the rest of the colors. I think that the matte that she included mixes very well with this tone, especially for deepening outer edges. So then the next and last shade from the first 6, which make up your Dark Galaxy, I actually jumped into a Morphe palette, which I really honestly don't like. And I like this shade though. It's called Excuse Me. It's right here, and it's a really, really deep purple. So now this deep purple in a Pat McGrath formula with that nice high shine metallic is probably going to be gorgeous, and that browns out those first 6. And like I said, I thought that the Dark Galaxy was gorgeous. I think that this is going to create some really pretty looks. So the first 6, there's really no blending shade. There is that nice deepening shade, but no blending shade. It's more just the metallics and that one matte. Now we get into the next 6. So now these are the 6 that are going to be the new colors to the collection that we have never seen before. Pat McGrath swatches have always been to me a mystery. They're never 100% accurate. It has a lot to do with the way that her lighting is. It also, to make it look like so reflective and pretty, I think sometimes it messes with the colors a little bit. So I'm going to do an educated guess here on what these colors are going to look like, and let's start off with the first one. So this is where I jumped into Natasha Denona's gold palette, and there is this really pretty color called Arium down here. This is the closest I can find. I feel like this one is actually going to be a pretty gold that has a little bit of yellow to it, but is going to be more orangey than yellow gold. I'm crossing my fingers for that because I know that Pat McGrath loves to put yellow golds. I'm hoping that this one is not, and I'm thinking that it isn't based off of the swatch. So the next one is another matte. So what I did was I jumped into Pumpkin Spice again. So I jumped into this color called Cocoa Drizzle, but I also mixed a little bit of this color called Spice Spice Baby and mixed them together. It's gonna be a brown with an orangey undertone to it from what I can see in the swatch. For me personally, this tone is going to be a little bit on the deep side for me to use as a blending shade. It's another nice deepening shade. One's gonna be a little bit more burgundy. This one's gonna be a little bit more orangey browns. I don't think they were super different. I understand why she did it because you had to be pretty neutral here because there's a lot of color going on. So if she would have gone a little bit too fun with these mattes, it might have not matched the palette, if you know what I'm saying. So I understand why she picked a tone like this one. It's pretty. Not my favorite, but it's pretty. So the next one, what I did was I jumped right back into Pumpkin Spice. You guys will see Pumpkin Spice is actually referenced a lot in this palette. I jumped into this color called Fall Vibes. I feel like in the palette images, this has a greeny tone to it. So I feel like this is where the Pat McGrath collectors are gonna be like, Pat McGrath is giving me green? Oh my goodness, I need this palette. I don't think it's going to be that strong of a green. If anything, I think it's going to be a shifty green. That's what, I don't know, because from the actual palette, it looks more green than her swatches did. So I'm going to just guess that it's going to be something close to this. It's going to be a goldish color that has green undertone to it. So that color I actually really, really love, and I love it inside the Pumpkin Spice. I think it does a really nice accent to the lids. It's a very pretty pronounced shade. So I think that this one's going to actually be a metallic, and I like it. I think it's pretty. So if we keep going, the next shade is actually one that I'm like, ugh. We have seen from Pat McGrath over and over and over and over. I feel like a very similar tone to this. This is like one of those magenta-y purpley shades, which you guys know I'm so tired of. And it's so funny because when I was looking through my collection, I actually had a really hard time finding this shade because I tend to not want to buy this color like ever. But I remember that inside of my Lila palette, some of the colors that I love to use, just kidding. So what I did was I jumped into this color called Viola, which is a little bit more purple, and mixed it with Magentic. You mix them both together, you get like a purpley pink metallic, which I think that this one's going to have a little bit more purpley metallic to it than straight up pink. Still not my favorite tone. It's a fun color to put in a palette because it sticks out. It makes the palette look fun and lively. It's just not a tone that I tend to use very often. Is it fun to have it in a Pat McGrath formula in a very small pan? Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be cool. So now this is where I jumped into Metropolis. So this one is one that's debatable. Debatable depending on how these swatches really turn out, if they are more true to color or not. What I did was I jumped into Metropolis and I grabbed this color called Chrism right here that's kind of like an orangey gold, but more like brass. It looks kind of like this brassy shade. So now from the swatches, that's what I gathered. I gathered that it's like a brassy shade. That one's going to be up for grabs depending on how accurate the Pat McGrath swatches are, but if it is that tone, I mean, it's another pretty tone. I was actually hoping that this one was going to be more of like a greenish metallic, which from the palette images, it looked like it was going to be. I originally found these colors like without seeing the swatches. I thought that this was going to be a little bit more green, but when I saw these swatches, I was like, that's orange. Now, the only thing it could be is it has some really strong dual chrome to it that really switches up the color. But so the last shade of the 6 new shades is one that, like I said, the swatches are giving me a very different representation of what the color looks like versus what it looks like in the pan. This sometimes happens. I mean, it happens sometimes, and Pat McGrath does it a lot though. I felt like it was going to look a lot like this color called A la Mode, which is going to be like more of a pinky peach tone. However, in her swatches, it gives me a lot more of an orange undertone. So what I ended up doing was adding a little bit of phosphor into it to give it a little bit more orange. And that's how I came up with that tone, to just kind of see what it looked like. And I still think I took a creative freedom to be a little bit on the lighter side, because I do feel like maybe the tone in the swatches might be a little bit more color enhanced. Like maybe they drew up that tone a little bit. It just doesn't look the same color. So that's where I went with it. I went on the lighter tone of maybe the same color. I feel like that one could probably be used as a blending shade, and you know, like the Peekaboo Undercover shade. I like this type of like pinky peach tone. Hopefully if it goes more in the peach family, it's going to go a lot better with a lot of the tones that we have here. I think it can mix really nice. I think it's going to be a very pretty undertone shade. However, it's the only one, like for my skin tone, that I can use as an under shade. All the rest of the mattes are deepening shades. So what you're really looking for in this palette are the metallic tones, and you're getting a lot of fun metallics. So the next 6 shades are going to be the Galactic Gold. So if you guys have the Galactic Gold, you have these shades. Like I said, I skipped out on both of them, so I don't have either one. So I had to find them as well. So for this first shade, what I did was I jumped into the BH Cosmetics palette and I grabbed this super, super bright gold right here. This is the same tone that I used when I did my Make Up Your Mind, and I feel like it ended up being pretty accurate, so that's the one I grabbed again. It's super, super yellowy gold, like a gold bar gold. So that's the color that I ended up grabbing. I think it matched pretty damn good to the Make Up Your Mind, so that's probably pretty spot on. The next one is a very confusing shade, and it depends on how you look at it. It could either be purple, it could either be blue, and this one is a super dual chrome. Like, I remember this one from when I did the Make Up Your Mind and being like, I don't even know what color this really is. So what I ended up doing was just kind of creating something that looked kind of similar. So what I did was I ended up mixing this color right here from the Leela palette. It's called Layla. I mixed Layla, which is this really dark color, with Amethyst to add a little bit more purple, and I jumped into this color right here called Livid. So those 3 tones mixed together is the way that I was able to create this purpley shade. I will tell you, I believe that the palette is going to even shift into a blue shade. So this is a very unique shade. I remember it being extremely unique, and I don't have it. I couldn't find anything extremely similar to it. That's the closest I could create. Okay, so now the next one was also another one that I remember being a shifty kind of shade. A little shifty little ink, and I remembered inside of Leela there was this color right here called Dragon Bite. That was the closest that I could remember it being close to. It swatches a little bit more pink, and then depending on how you look at it, it looks a little bit more purple, and I feel like that's what's happening with this shade as well. So this is also going to be one that's a little bit different depending on how you look at it, but that's the closest tone I could find in my collection. I do remember kind of like what it looks like, so I have a pretty good idea. So the next one is actually a gorgeous color that I remember from Queen of Hearts. There's this really pretty color up here called Your Majesty. It's kind of close to the other color right here that has like a little bit of an orangey undertone, but it goes a lot more orange, and it's such a pretty tone, and that one I feel like matches really good. Okay, so this is another one that I had to mix. This is another interesting shade. So it depends on how you look at this one. This one switched a lot of the colors on me as well, I remember. So what I did was I jumped into Marc Jacobs and I grabbed this tone right here. So this is kind of like a brownish tone. It's a little bit of like red in it. So what I did was I jumped into Sunrise and I just grabbed a little bit of Phylix, this color right here, and just dabbed it on top to shift this color into a little bit more of a reddish brown. It's also another tone that I don't really have in my collection, and looking at her swatch, it looks so red. But I remember when this palette released and people swatched it on their arms, I remember saying, oh my God, I thought that was red. Where did the red go? It was so much less red. And I do believe that this one also shifts a little bit with the light. So then finally, my last tone, what I ended up doing was going into the Natasha Denona Gold palette and grabbing this gorgeous color up on the top called Kava. I love this tone. Gorgeous, kind of like a champagne-y gold, very pretty gold. I love this gold a lot, and yeah, I would kind of like it in the metallic formula from Pat McGrath. So that rounds out the palette for me. Okay, so here are my thoughts on this palette. This one is actually quite interesting to me because there's a few things that can turn somebody off completely, and there's a few really interesting things. So I don't think that the palette is perfect by any means, because I do feel like mixing those two palettes together, the Galactic Gold and the Dark Galaxy, they had tones in them that I personally don't think that I would have used together. You know, like they were very cool separated, but they're not like those two type of palettes that you say, oh my goodness, I want to buy them to mix them. They were kind of on their own. So now that they're thrown into this palette together, I'm like, oh my goodness, this color story is amazing. I would have loved this palette to have just been a huge palette. It doesn't feel that way to me. So those two sections, the 12, they're very pretty shades. I liked them better on their own than together. But that being said, it's kind of nice to just have them all together for a cheaper price. I really wish that there would have been something a little more unique about the middle shades. And I really, from the image, thought that they were going to be more green. And I really think if they would be more green, that would make it more unique. So if I see swatches that they go on the more green side, I'm going to be a little bit more excited for the palette. Like I said, it could be the shifting. Maybe they shift a little bit more green. But unfortunately with Pat McGrath, I don't think that we're going to get daylight swatches of her palette until it starts getting sent out to people. I do think the color story is a little all over the place. I think that this was just a lot of fun colors mixed in together to create this really fun, celestial, alien-esque type of palette that's just going to be so intergalactic cool. Don't think that she really thought of sticking to a color story or looking at a certain color story. I think it was more about just giving her fans these really fun colors, maybe some colors that people missed out on, and maybe trying to attract another audience. I feel like this is like an introductory palette into trying to get a more broad audience and giving them a little bit more fun. Now, if I was a collector and I purchased those big palettes and then I find out that they're being re-released into this cheaper palette but giving people less product, I think I would be a little bit annoyed, to be honest. I probably would, because Pat McGrath's brand is this luxury brand. It's pricey. You know, you get this huge experience with just the packaging. And she kind of re-released this to everybody in a cheaper packaging, and now you're like, wait, but I just paid all this money. So you got a really nice case with more formula, you know? So I can understand somebody's point of view that would be a little bit annoyed by that. They kind of want Pat McGrath to continue to release the big palettes, be expensive, but don't give that same shade to somebody else at a cheaper price. I understand that. Now, I think it's kind of cool that she did this because I'm not one of the people who purchased the Galactic Gold or the Dark Galaxy. If I was, I think I probably would be like some other people, like, what? Another thing is I really truly think that this palette is going to be a little bit smaller than we think. I'm thinking it's going to look like this, you know, like this size, and then maybe a little bit bigger because it has 18 and this one doesn't. So this is like what I'm thinking. It's going to be like that. And people might actually feel like, oh wow, this is smaller than I expected. I have to make up my mind right now and tell you guys that I personally think that I might pick this up. And that might be a shocker because you guys probably heard a few negative things here. But the reason that I might pick this up is because I truly believe that this could be a fun add-on palette, that you can have so many awesome metallics from the Pat McGrath line that I probably would never use together. I wouldn't even think of this as a palette that I would use in one, maybe every once in a while, but I would want these metallics to mix them with other shades in other palettes that I have. Maybe more neutral palettes, I would jump into one of these metallics. One of the downsides for me is that I love that really cool formula she has that she's known for. I forgot what it's called. Is it like the Celestial formula or something like that? And I think that there isn't any in this palette. I read online that it's a matte, dual chrome, and metallic finish palette, and that there is no celestial shades in it. Let me know down below if that is true. I wish that there was some, because that would be like super cool, like to have those really cool glittery shades in here. Like I think that would have made this like even more attractive, but I believe that it doesn't. But let me know if it does. But I will say, I still think that this price point is a tad on the high side for what you're getting. You're getting very small pans, you're getting cardboard packaging, and you're still paying $76. And the reason I can't say yes 100% is because she's releasing some quads that look very interesting, and they have that very cool formula that I don't mind paying a higher dollar price point for. Oh God, this is a very hard one, guys. So right now I'm gonna leave it at a maybe. Closer to the yes. Closer to the yes side. Let me know down below if you guys are planning on picking this up. What do you guys think of the fact that she's re-releasing 12 shades? Do you like the new shades enough to purchase it again? What do you think about the size, the price? Leave everything down below. I want your opinions. But anyways, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video, and yeah, I'm gonna talk to you guys later. Bye.